Namaskar, good afternoon and very warm welcome to all our learners and viewers in this live phone-in session of CIET NCERT. I am Renu Bhatt with you all, and you are with us on PMeVIDYA channel number 11, and on our NCERT official YouTube channel. And dear learner, in this special session, we are going to learn more about Morphology of flowering plants, part 2nd. Part 1st we have already done. If you have missed that session, you can visit and explore our YouTube channel, that is NCERT official. And in first session, you have learned a lot about morphology of flowering plants. This is our 2nd session, and we have our expert with us in our studio. Let's meet her. You are Dr. Pooja Gokhale Sinha, and ma'am, you are assistant professor from Department of Botany, Sri Venkateshwara College, University of Delhi. Very warm welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Renu. Thanks a lot for having me.
And before we begin the session, it's our live phone-in session, and we are expecting your participation in this live phone-in session. We have various mediums. You can connect to us in this live phone-in session. That you can call us, you can mail us, and either you can drop a mail at our email address. You can call us on our telephone number, that is 8800440559. Either you can drop a mail at our email address, that is dth.class11@gmail.com. ciet.nic.in. And if you have joined us through live streaming, that means you are on our NCERT official YouTube channel. Go to the live chat box and drop your comment out there. Our expert will be happy to answer all your queries and questions and doubts if you have any. So ma'am, by the time our learners join us, this is our 2nd session, right?
Yes.
So can we start with a brief recap?
Sure, Renu, sure. We'll have a brief recap of what we have done in the previous session. Now this session is based upon chapter number 5 of 11th standard NCERT, that is Morphology of flowering plants. In our previous session, we have already touched upon the basics of plant morphology. We have discussed the different type of stem, type of roots, and also we have done the different adaptations which these organs have. In this session, we are going to switch over to the type of leaves, which one part we have already done in the previous session. We have done the simple leaf and the basic structure of leaf. Now we are going to move on to the compound leaf, and we are going to study what are the different type of leaves.
So what are the content of the session, ma'am?
Yeah, we are also going to talk about the different terms and different type of floral organs that a plant has, and also inflorescence. Because finally, at the end of this chapter, we will be discussing about the taxonomy of plants,
okay,
plant classification.
So that was wonderful. So ma'am, shall we begin the session?
Yeah, sure, Renu.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So
I hope our students learn from this session and they are benefited, and if any queries, then we can take that up. So now we move on to the morphology of flowering plants. In the previous session, we have already done the type of simple leaf. We start with a compound leaf in this session. A compound leaf is a leaf in which the incision of the lamina, it reaches up to the midrib. So what happens? We'll see very small leaflet-like structures in a compound leaf. You can see on your screen, there's a compound leaf. So each of the very small leaf-like structure is actually a leaflet, and the complete bunch of each leaflet is actually a leaf. So this is a compound leaf. Now in the axil of a simple leaf or a compound leaf, there is always a bud through which either a branch or a flower emerge. But leaflets, they do not have buds and their axil. A compound leaf in plants is basically divided, it can be of two types. The first is the pinnately compound leaf, in which you can see there is a single axis which is known as a rachis, and on this axis on both the sides we have small leaflets arranged. So we very commonly see this kind of an arrangement in neem. Neem we all have seen very closely. So neem is an example of a pinnately compound leaf. The other option or the other type of compound leaf is permeately compound leaf, in which all the leaflets, they are not arranged on a longitudinal axis, rather they are arranged on a single axis and they emerge from a same point. So the tip of the petiole is the point from where the small leaflets, they emerge. So the plant or this leaf, this compound leaf appears like a palm. That is why the term permeately compound leaf is used. And in silk cotton, we usually see this kind of an arrangement. It has this kind of an arrangement. Another interesting feature which is associated with the structure and organization or morphology of leaf is the Phylotaxi. Now Phylotaxi, it is a term which is used to describe arrangement of leaf on stem or branch. Philo means leaf and taxi means its arrangement. So Phylotaxi is very important when we classify plants or when we categorize them, and it is a very important character because a lot of plant classification is dependent on the Phylotaxi. So on basis of whether leaves on a single branch they are arranged opposite to each other, or they are arranged alternate to each other, or they are spiral, we have three different type of leaf arrangements or Phylotaxi. The first arrangement is the alternate arrangement, in which a single leaf arises from one node and the other leaf will arise from another node in the alternate manner. So they will not be just in front of each other, they will be alternate to each other.
Okay.
This kind of Phylotaxi, it is observed in China rose and mustard. We all should, students appreciate and observe plants around us because all these characters are very easily visible characters. And if we observe them in plants around us, then it becomes very easy for us to kind of remember them and understand them. Now we come to the second type of Phylotaxi, which is the opposite arrangement of leaves. Now in opposite arrangement of leaves, there is a pair of leaf and they arise from a single point and arise opposite to each other. So this kind of an arrangement is observed in guava trees, and the leaves of calotropis also show this kind of an arrangement. You can see on your screens, we have the opposite arrangement of leaves or opposite Phylotaxi. The third type of Phylotaxi is whorled. Whorl, the name itself suggests, it appears like a whorl or a round kind of an arrangement. So when more than two leaves arise at a node, so that node appears to be a whorled kind of a node, many leaves arise at it. So this kind of an arrangement is observed in Alstonia, and also it is very easily observed in many other trees around us. So these are the three basic types of leaf arrangements or the basic types of Phylotaxi. Now leaf is a primary organ where photosynthesis happens in plants. We all are aware of the process of photosynthesis and the importance of leaf. However, there are certain exceptions and also modifications wherein the leaf, it switches over from photosynthesis and also performs other interesting features for the functions for the plant. So this kind of behavior or this kind of different functions of leaf is observed, and leaves, they help in giving plant support, they help in synthesizing food, which is a natural process. They also help in provide defense to plants. So we will discuss each one of them, the different modifications, rather functional and structural modifications of leaf which we see around us. Now,
as we can see, there were three different types of classification of leaves, right?
Yeah.
So do they function differently or separately, or?
No. It is just the arrangement.
Okay.
The primary function of the leaf is photosynthesis, whether they are pinnately compound or simple leaf, whether they are arranged in alternate or opposite arrangement. Leaf primarily functions, its function is photosynthesis.
Okay.
Yes, it doesn't change. So now we come over to the slide again, and the leaf for support. We all have seen pea plant and other such plants in which we see very small tendrils. Now a tendril is actually a leaf which is modified, and it modified into small structures which are very thin structures and they are spirally coiled. So these spirals, they help in twining over a stem or a support system, and the plant, it climbs over. So in climbers particularly we see a lot of tendrils. So the tendrils that we see is actually an arrangement of, it is actually a modification of leaf. Then we have seen cactus around us. I am sure most of you have seen cacti plants. So in cactus, the small spines that we see, they are actually modified leaves, and the thick fleshy portion that you see is the stem. So leaves in cacti, they are modified in order to provide protection and defense, and at the same time they also help in reducing transpiration. So these are the two modifications of leaf that we have seen. Also other modifications are there. We all have onion, and many of us also have garlic. So what we eat in onion and garlic is actually the fleshy leaves which are modified to store food. So leaves in onion and garlic, they are modified to form fleshy structures which store food. In addition to the above three, leaves in some plants, they also they perform the function, and the leaves become short-lived, and it is the petiole that actually performs the function of photosynthesis. So the petiole, or the main rachis on which the leaf is arranged, it performs the function of photosynthesis, and it becomes more leaf-like. Now we come to a very interesting adaptation of leaves. Most of us know that plants, they synthesize their own food, and plants are autotrophs. But there are certain plants which are not autotrophs. Those plants are the insectivorous plants. Now these insectivorous plants, they help, the leaves of these insectivorous plants, they help in catching small insects and also digesting the insects to support the nutritional requirement of the plant. So pitcher plant is one example. Venus flytrap is a very interesting example, in which the leaves are modified to form pitchers, and you can see Venus flytrap on your screen. So the spiny structures, the orange colored structure, they are actually leaves, and as soon as an insect, it falls in the leaf, so the leaf, they fold, and then the insect is digested. So leaves, in addition to the simple routine photosynthesis, they also perform several interesting functions for plants, and they are very, very important for the other metabolic activities of plants as well. So this was about leaves. Till here we have discussed all the vegetative structures of plants. What are the different terms which are used to define these vegetative terms? What are the variations which are found? Now onwards, the next part of the presentation, we will be switching over to the reproductive structure of plants. Plants, they sexually reproduce, and in order to help sexual reproduction in plants, flowers are the organs which play a significant role. Flowers are the primary sexually flowers are the primary organs which help plants to sexually reproduce. So the male and the female gametes, they are generated in the different organs of flower. So we are going to talk about the inflorescence. Now inflorescence is a modified shoot. We know about we know that a normal shoot, it has leaves, but a modified shoot, it bears flowers. This shoot, which has to bear flower, or an inflorescence, it modifies itself by reducing the length of the internode. So the internodes do not get elongated when the plant has to bear inflorescence or flowers on a shoot apex, and the axis, it gets condensed. So it reduces in its length, it gets condensed. Now this axis, it bears different appendages which are the different organs of a flower, and there are various variations, different ways in which the flowers are arranged on the axis. So this arrangement is known as inflorescence. So inflorescence is the arrangement of flowers on a axis, on the floral axis. Sometimes we see that there are single flowers which are born on plants. Sometimes we see that flowers, they occur in clusters. So that is an inflorescence. Now the shoot, depending upon whether the shoot apex, it keeps on growing after it produces flower or it stops growing, the inflorescence is majorly divided into two types. Now the first type is the racemose. Racemose is the type of inflorescence in which the main axis, it continues to grow after even bearing flowers. So as a result, what happens, the tip of the inflorescence or the tip of the axis, it will bear flowers which are very young. So the youngest flowers, they are born at the tip, and since the axis keeps on growing, so the older flowers, they shift towards the downwards. So the younger flowers are at the tip, and the older flowers are at the lower portion of the inflorescence, and this type of inflorescence is known as a racemose kind of an inflorescence. You can see on your screens that the tip portion of the axis, it is having yellow colored flowers. Now this is these flowers, the tip flowers are very small, or they are very young in the development, and the older flowers are born at towards the base. The second type of inflorescence is opposite to that we see in raceme or racemose. It is cymose. In cymose type of inflorescence, the main inflorescence axis, after it bears a flower, it stops growing. So the growth of the main axis, it terminates, and the lateral branches, they grow and they start bearing flowers. So this type of an arrangement is known as a cymose type of inflorescence. If we see in this particular image, so the first flower on the left is a white flower, it is a flower of Dhatura, and this flower, it is a solitary flower. Solitary flower is the term when a flower is singly born. It is not occurring in clusters. So solitary means single. And on the right you can see this is a raceme or a racemose type of an arrangement which is observed in Brassica. So mustard inflorescence we all must have seen. You can see at the tip of the mustard inflorescence there are young buds, and towards the lower parts the flowers are mature. Some of the flowers have even, the anthesis has taken place and the petals have withered away. So this is a arrangement of racemose. Now talking about the basic structure of a single flower. Flower, it is the reproductive unit in angiosperms. So it is the organ which participates in sexual reproduction in the flowering plants. A typical flower, it has 4 appendages which are arranged in the form of whorls. So they are arranged in cyclic manner in the form of whorls on a thalamus or a receptacle. So the structure, the fleshy structure on which all these appendages are born, they are known as thalamus or receptacle. Now this receptacle or a thalamus is actually the swollen end of a pedicel. Pedicel is the stalk on which the flower is born, and when the tip of the pedicel it becomes a bit swollen, it is known as a thalamus, and this thalamus or receptacle, it has 4 whorls. Now these 4 whorls, starting from the outside towards the inside, they are known as calyx, corolla, androsium and gynoecium. In some plants, we do not have the calyx and corolla. So in those plants, the outermost whorl is known as a perianth. Now we will be studying the other structures which are the other features of a flower. Now depending upon whether a flower it has androsium and gynoecium, a flower is categorized into bisexual or unisexual flowers. Androsium we will be discussing in this presentation in the later parts. Androsium is the male reproductive structure of a flower and gynoecium is the female reproductive structure of a flower. So if both these are found in a flower, then the flower is said to be a bisexual flower, and if either of the two is present, then the flower is known to be a unisexual flower. A flower in which only the male organ or the androsium is present, it is known as the staminate flower, and a flower in which gynoecium and the female organ, only the gynoecium or the female organ is present, that flower is known as a pistillate flower. So also when we look at a flower, the symmetry of a flower is also very important. Students, when we are talking about all these characters, it is very important that all these characters should be kept in mind, and you should all remember these terms, because description of plants not only help us in classifying the plant, but also it helps us in putting the plants in the right taxonomic category. So bisexual and unisexual is one character. The second character, it is dependent upon the symmetry of the flower. Now this character, according to this, a flower can be actinomorphic, zygomorphic, okay, or asymmetric. Now actinomorphic flower is a flower which remains to be in the same. If you divide the flower in different planes, then you have laterally superimposable images of the flower. So if I have to give you an example of an actinomorphic flower, so if you look at the sunflower, even though sunflower is not a single flower, it is a compound flower, but the inflorescence is an actinomorphic inflorescence in sunflower. You can divide it into any plane and the two lateral halves will be superimposable images of each other. But on your right you can see a zygomorphic flower, which is a delphinium flower. Now a zygomorphic flower is a flower which cannot be divided into two laterally equal superimposable images in more than one half. So a zygomorphic flower, if you cut it longitudinally or if you just try and imagine it longitudinally, you can superimpose the image, but at the same time if you cut it diagonally or laterally, then you cannot have superimposable images. So the symmetry of a flower is very important, and actinomorphic flowers, they can be divided into many planes and they give us equal halves. Zygomorphic flowers do not give us equal halves. And the third category of flowers are the asymmetric flowers. Now asymmetric flowers are the flowers which cannot be divided into similar halves by vertical plane also. So canna flower is a flower which is a asymmetric flower. So symmetry of a flower is also a very crucial character when we describe flower. You need to understand all these characters and also remember these terms, because you have to describe them in the later part of the chapter, and also for practical purposes this is very, very important.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now we move on to other characters of a flower. Now depending upon how many floral appendages, how many whorls of the floral appendages are there. So whether a plant it has 3 petals, whether a plant has 4 or multiples of 4 petals, 3 or multiples of 3 petals, or 5 petals or sepals. So depending upon these numbers, flowers are divided into trimerous, in which the appendages, they are either 3 in number or in multiples of 3. So it will have 3 sepals, 3 petals, or it can be tetramerous. Tetramerous is when it has 4 petals, 4 sepals. Tetramerous flowers like brassica flower is a tetramerous flower. Then you have pentamerous flowers, in which the whorls are in the multiples of 5 or 5. So you have 5 petals, 5 sepals. So when you see hibiscus, it is a pentamerous flower, it has 5 petals. So this is one character, the number of individual of each whorl. So how many sepals, how many petals, etc. Next character, which is also important, is whether the flower it has a bract or not. A bract is a small leaf-like structure which is present around, it is a reduced leaf which is present in the pedicel. So it just lower in the flower on the pedicel. So if a flower has bract, then we say that the flower is bracteate. If the flower does not have a bract, then we say that the flower is ebracteate. So these are the taxonomic terms which are used. Now coming to an extremely important feature, which is the position of the other appendages vis-a-vis the position of the gynoecium. Now position of ovary in a plant is very important with respect to the position of calyx, corolla and androsium. Based upon this character, flowers are categorized into hypogynous, perigynous and epigynous. You can see all the 4 types on your screen. Let us understand them by one. Now hypogynous flower is a flower in which the gynoecium or the ovary majorly, it occupies highest position and all the other whorls are situated below it. So the first flower that you see on your screen, the ovary, it is present at the higher pedestal and all the other organs are lower than it. So the stamens, the androsium, the petals, they emerge from below the ovary. This condition is known as a hypogynous condition of a flower, and the ovary in this condition is said to be a superior ovary. This is observed in mustard. The next is the perigynous flower. Perigynous flower are the flower in which the gynoecium is situated in the center and all the other whorls, they emerge simultaneously from the rim around it. So the level of the ovary and all the other appendages, the petals, sepals and the androsium, it's almost the same. So the ovary in this condition is known as the flower is considered called as perigynous, and the ovary is said to be inferior ovary. We see this kind of an arrangement in rose and plum. The third category is the epigynous arrangement, epigynous type of flower, in which the main thalamus on which all the other whorls are born. So the thalamus grows upwards and it kind of encloses the ovary completely. So the ovary kind of becomes embedded in the thalamus, and all other whorls, they emerge from above it. So this kind of an arrangement, the flower is known as epigynous flowers, and the ovary is said to be inferior because it is lying below all the other floral appendages. So these are the different type of ovaries. Now coming to the other parts of the flowers, let us discuss all the floral appendages one by one. Up till now we have talked about the general flower characters which are used to describe a flower. Coming to each one of the appendages, we will be discussing what are their functions, how they look like, and also the variations which they have, and also some examples. Now let us talk about the first and the outermost whorl of a flower, which is the calyx. Calyx is a whorl of sepals. Individual member of a calyx is known as a sepal. Sepal is a green colored leaf-like appendage which is present, and the major function of the sepal is to protect the flower, particularly in the bud stage. Now you can see in the diagram which is there, the pedicel, it has the calyx which is the lowermost whorl in the flower. Now calyx, when we talk about the sepals, can be fused with each other or they can be free. When we say fused, then all the sepals, they are fused or are connected to each other, and free sepals means all the sepals, they occur in isolation from each other, they are not connected to each other. So based upon whether a sepal, whether the sepals in a whorl, whether they are fused or free, calyx can be of polysepalous or gamosepalous. Polysepalous is the sepals when they are fused, and gamosepalous is the calyx where the sepals are free. Now poly is free, and gamo is fused. So now we move on to the corolla. Corolla is the second appendage or the second whorl which is present in a flower next to the calyx. Corolla is it is made up of petals, and it is the most visible and the colorful part of the flower that we see. It is brightly colored, and the main function of the corolla is to attract insect for pollination, because in sexual reproduction in plants, pollination is a very, very important process, and the corolla, it acts as a attracting agent for the pollinators such as insects, birds and bees. Now corolla, the individual member of corolla is known as a sepal, and like the distinction in the individual member is known as a petal, and like the distinction in the calyx, corolla, if the petals are fused, the corolla is said to be gamopetalous, and if the individual members, they are free, then the corolla is said to be polypetalous. So polypetalous and gamopetalous. I would like to mention here, students, that when we do experiment of taxonomy in classroom, so we refer to the Bentham and Hooker's system of classification. Now Bentham and Hooker's system of classification is a very practical plant classification, and it uses the characters which can be easily described. So the fusion of the appendages, the fusion of corolla and calyx is one of the most important character which is used in that classification. So from practical taxonomic point of view, this character of whether the petals and the sepals are free or fused is a very, very important character. Now we move on to the next whorl or the next appendage, which is the Androsium. Before that, let us also discuss that when we talk about whorls, so how the whorls are arranged, how sepals are arranged, how petals are arranged, that is also a very, very important taxonomic character, and that arrangement is known as estivation. Estivation, it is the mode of arrangement of the floral whorls in a flower, and there are broadly 4 types of estivation which are seen. Even though there are also different subtypes, we will be talking about 4 different types of arrangement. The first arrangement is the valvate arrangement of whorls. Now the image on your screen, you can see very clearly that the whorls or the sepals or the petals, they are arranged just next to each other. So they form like a circle, and then on that circle the whorls are arranged. Now this arrangement is known as the valvate arrangement of petals and sepals, and it is observed in plants like Calotropis, the ankh plant. So the Calotropis plant, it has this arrangement. The next arrangement is the twisted arrangement. The name itself suggests twisted means a bit tweaked or complicated. It is observed in China rose, and in twisted arrangement what happens is that the petals, one is internal, when one petal is there the other partially covers it, and likewise one external, one internal, so they are in the alternate kind of a manner. So they are twisted. This kind of an arrangement is known as twisted arrangement of petals. The third category is an imbricate petal arrangement. Imbricate estivation is observed in plants like canna, and in imbricate you can see that one petal or sepal is interior, completely inside, and one is completely outside, and the three others, they are alternate. So one part is outside, one is inside, and three are alternate. One petal or sepal is totally inside and one is totally outside. So this arrangement is known as the imbricate arrangement, and it is observed in canna. The fourth type of arrangement or fourth type of estivation is also known as the vexillary estivation, and also the papilionaceous arrangement or the papilionaceous estivation, because members of the Papilionaceae family, they show this. So the pea plant that you all would have seen, pea flowers, they all see this estivation. Now what happens?
Does it make any difference, although all flowers are very pretty and beautiful, does it make any difference to them?
Yeah, sometimes it does, because what happens, Renu, that in plants like salvia is a plant in which, particularly the plants which are dependent on insects and birds for their pollination. So these arrangements, sometimes they are attuned to help the pollinator come and sit on them.
Okay.
So I will give you an example of a bat pollinated plant which is Kaigelia. So the flower looks like this. So the bats, they can come and sit on this. If you see flowers, bird pollinated flowers, so they have a long tube.
Right.
So that arrangement, it helps the birds to put in their beak, suck out the nectar, and at the same time pollinate.
Okay.
So the arrangement, not only they attract, but they also help in the pollination by structurally being oriented like the animal.
Okay.
A very good example is orchids. We all have seen beautiful flowers of orchids.
Right.
So many orchids, they mimic their pollinators. So it's a very interesting branch of biodiversity of plants which students can, like, they should take up.
Yes, it's quite interesting to
Yeah.
know all those things.
Yeah. So coming back to the presentation, the last type of estivation is the vexillary. So the first or the topmost petal that you are seeing, you can see the arrangement on your screen. So the topmost the petal which is at the top, that is known as the standard. It is the largest petal and it covers, like it, you know, it makes an arc like structure. The two petals at the periphery towards the lateral side, they are known as lateral petals or also wings, and the lower two petals, they are fused. So those two lower petals, they are fused and they are together, they are known as a keel.
Okay.
So this arrangement of vexillary arrangement or estivation is characteristically found in the members of Papilionaceae family. So you can see already based on the estivation, one family is associated. So because these floral characters, they form very, very important, you know, tools or markers, I would say, for classifying plants.
Okay.
So moving on ahead, now we come to the Androsium. Androsium is the male reproductive part of a plant, and it is made up of stamens. So individual member of an Androsium, it is made up of stamens, and the stamen, it has two parts. The part which is sterile or which acts like a stalk, it is known as a filament, and the fertile part which has the pollen grains, it is known as the main anther. So anther together with the filament makes the stamen, and in a flower, group of stamens, they together make the Androsium. So Androsium is a collective term which is given to represent all the stamens in a flower. Now there are certain plants in which some stamens are sterile. they do not have an anther and they do not produce pollen grains. So those stamens, they are known as staminodes. Now when we look at flowers, stamens sometimes they are free or independent. Sometimes stamens, they are attached with the other appendages. So they can be attached with petals, sometimes they are attached with other appendages sometimes. Now depending upon whether the stamens, they are attached with other floral appendages, stamens can be categorized into epipetalous and epiphyllous types. Epipetalous, epi means fixed, joint, kind of associated, and petalous means with the petal. So epipetalous stamens are the stamens which are attached to the petals. So this arrangement, this type of Androsium is observed in brinjal. Then epiphyllous, that means the stamens which are attached to the perianth. Remember, in the beginning we have talked about the perianth, when we do not have the typical petal and the sepal, so we have perianth, and individual member of a perianth is known as a tepal. So when the stamens are attached to the tepals, so that arrangement it is known as epiphyllous, and this kind of an arrangement it is observed in the lily plant or the flowers of lily. So these terms you all should remember, and when you look around flowers and then you relate the terms with the flowers, it becomes very easy, remembering them for longer period.
Ma'am, here I want to ask you about, as you were talking about the terms, there are some specific terms related to flower morphology, and that is quite important and significant also. But why do we need all those terms, ma'am?
Because very interestingly, flowers and plants, they have a lot of diversity. Like we cannot say that all the flowers are same, all the characters are very different. So the first thing, if we do not give terminologies to describe the characters, it will not make much sense. How do we scientifically define a term? We have to be very scientific in how we describe. So the basic principle of science is observation, then description, then analysis, hypothesis, and all those concepts. So terms in botany particularly related to the floral organs, they are very important because there is a diversity, and to separate different plants from each other, we need to put the terms in the right context. The second advantage of having these terms is that when we describe all the plants and when we want to classify plants, so these terms, they are very useful in that classification. So by looking at the flower, by describing it, I can quickly say, okay, this is a family, this is a characteristic feature of this family, and this particular plant belongs to this family. A very small example I will give you, calyx we were talking about. So calyx, persistent calyx. Persistent means it is always there, and calyx is the green sepal wala appendage. So that persistent calyx, it is a characteristic feature of Solanaceae. It is a family of plants. And if we look around members of Solanaceae, if you see brinjal, it has that cap-like green calyx, so that is a persistent calyx. Tomato, a calyx always is there. Right. So these terms, they help us not only in kind of describing, but also they help in classifying.
Okay.
So this is the relevance.
Okay, nice, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to the presentation again. Now, we were talking about stamens. So stamens, they can be free. That means all the stamens, they can occur in isolation with each other, or they can be fused. So when stamens, they are free, then that kind of an arrangement is known as polyandrous stamens. So when the stamens are free. Now stamens can be fused with each other, and there are different ways in which they can be fused. So we take, let us take an example of China rose. Now in China rose, all the stamens, they are arranged or they are kind of fused into a single bunch. Now this kind of a grouping, or this is known as monadelphous stamens. Mono means one, adelphous means the the grouping of stamens. So monoadelphous stamens is observed in China rose. The second is diadelphous. Di means two. So when the stamens, they are united into two bundles. So diadelphous stamens, they are observed in pea plant. The third type is the polyadelphous stamens, in which there are more than two bundles in which stamens are associated. So the polyadelphous stamens, they are observed in the plants like canna. So there are variations in the pattern of arrangement and also the association of stamens with each other. After Androsium, the innermost whorl of a flower and the whorl which has the female reproductive organs, that is known as the gynoecium. Now gynoecium in flowering plants, it is actually a group of carpels. Carpel is a single unit of a flower which is a single female reproductive unit, and a carpel, it has ovary, style and stigma. So one carpel, it has ovary at the base, then the middle portion, it is known as the style, and the topmost portion of a carpel which receives the pollen grain for fertilization, that is known as the stigma. And many plants, they are monocarpellary, that means they have only one carpel. Many plants are polycarpellary. So when carpels, they fuse together, a group of carpels or a single carpel, this is known as a gynoecium. Now we move on to the what are the individual organs or the subparts of a carpel and what are their functions. Now ovary, it is the part of the carpel which lies at the base of the carpel and it bears ovules. Ovary is the region which has the ovules, and inside the ovules are the egg cells which are actually responsible for the process of fertilization. So the female gamete in a carpel is actually present inside the ovule which is in the ovary, and many ovules are present in some ovaries. Sometimes ovaries, it has only one ovule, sometimes it has many ovules, and they are arranged on the placenta. Placenta is a fleshy structure which helps in providing or supplying nutrition to the developing ovule. After the ovary, now depending upon whether the carpels in a gynoecium, whether they are free or fused. So we have majorly two type of plants. The plants in which the carpels are free, those plants are known as apocarpous plants. For example, lotus. In lotus, the carpels are not fused to each other, they are free. So free carpel, the plants or the flowers which have carpels which are free, they are known as apocarpous. And the plants in which the carpels, they are fused, those plants or those flowers are known as syncarpous. Syncarpous flowers, they are found in mustard. So mustard is an example of a syncarpous flower. Now when we talk about ovary, then a very important character which is used to classify a plant and put them into the their right families and even genera sometimes. So that character is known as placentation. I just mentioned that placenta, it is a fleshy structure which is responsible for providing nutritional support to the growing ovules. Now depending upon how the ovules, they are arranged in an ovary, we have different type of placentations. Now placentation, I would like you all to just recall pea pod, the mutter ka pod that we all nowadays, winters are there and all of us have mutter. So when we open the pod, so it is a very interesting observation, all of you should observe it, that the all the seeds, they are arranged at the ridge or at the periphery on one side, and this kind of an arrangement is known as a marginal arrangement. In marginal arrangement, the placenta, it forms a ridge along the ventral suture of the ovary. So that ventral suture, it has the placenta, and on that the ovules are born. So after fertilization, when the ovules the fertilization has taken place, then the ovules, they actually make the seeds. So that seed is what we eat. But when we open it, you can see that the placentation is marginal. This is an example of marginal placentation. The second type of placentation is axile placentation. Now axile placentation, the name again itself, axis, it is on the axis or the central axis. So the placenta is in the center, and on that central placenta, the ovules are attached. This is usually found in multilocular ovaries. Multilocular ovary is an ovary when the ovule, it has multiple chambers. So each chamber in the ovary is known as the locule, and each chamber it has ovules. So those ovules, they are attached at the center of the ovary at the placenta, on the placenta. So that arrangement you can see on your screen, axile presentation. So the yellow structures, 2 in each ovule. It is a trilocular ovary that you see, a transverse section of a trilocular ovary, diagrammatic representation, and each locule, it has 2 ovules arranged in axile presentation. The next type of presentation is parietal presentation. Parietal, you can just remember it like from the periphery. So parietal presentation, the ovules, they are born from the wall. They are arranged at the wall on the inner side. So inner wall of the ovary, they bear the ovule. So that placenta is the parietal presentation, and it is observed in mustard. Now what happens sometimes, that if in the parietal presentation the cellularization takes place. So as a result of cellularization, the ovule or the ovary, it appears to be separated by a septum, but in reality technically it is not. So this kind of a situation is observed in brassica, in which the ovary is one chambered, but what happens, it becomes, or it appears to be two chambered due to the presence of a false septum. So this is observed in brassica. The next type of presentation is free central presentation. Free central presentation is the one in which the ovules, they are born on the central axis and there are no septa. So there is no marcation, there is no ovule. Usually unilocular ovaries, they have this kind of a presentation. Now free central presentation is it is found in plants such as Dhatura. The last presentation, it is the basal presentation. Now basal presentation is the type in which the ovule, it develops on the base of the ovary, and usually a single ovule is present. So the base of the ovary, it has one ovule, and then it is the basal presentation which has the single ovule. So this kind of an arrangement is observed in sunflower. Now sunflower, all the flowers, all the small florets in the sunflower, they have this kind of an arrangement.
Sure, ma'am.
So any questions we are getting, Renu?
Not yet, ma'am, but
okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What is the practical application of describing plants, ma'am? Can you please explain?
Yeah, practical application is like these students in the next module we are going to understand that when I have 5 plants, if I have 5 plants, so I will first pick up plant 1 and start describing. In the previous module we have done how we describe the stem, how we describe the root, how we describe other leaf. So we start writing those and we use taxonomic terms which are standardized taxonomic terms. So after the vegetative characters, we describe the reproductive character.
Okay.
Now when we describe them, so there are certain characters, like I was telling, polypetally and gamopetally, or polypetalous and gamopetalous. So we come across such terms, and these terms are the ones which help us in putting the plants into their right taxonomic category. It is important for many aspects, for conservation of biodiversity, for understanding plants, and also it helps us in understanding different plants which behave in different ways, say invasive plants. So these reproductive characters, they actually help us in classifying plants, giving them proper names, putting them in the right, because sometimes it has been observed that plants, if we study only few characters, so we wrongly identify plants or we wrongly put them into a different group of plants. So for correct classification, for correct taxonomy. Now why it is important? Nowadays we all know that plants are medicinally so important. So reproductive characters, if I go to a field and if I want to harvest a medicinally important plant, I want to understand. So there are certain characteristic features of that particular plant.
Right.
So if I know the characters, I will never wrongly identify. So from field, if I have to collect some specimen, if I have to put it into medicinal use, if I have to use the plant in drug discovery, so that taxonomy is very, very important in that. Again, in conservation, understanding reproductive characters, putting them into the right families may help in devising strategies which can help us, reclaim some threatened and rare and endangered plant, which is very crucial because we are losing biodiversity at a great rate. So these are the practical applications of having taxonomic characters, particularly reproductive characters of plants.
Okay. Ma'am, you have explained this so beautifully and in a detailed manner. Would you like to add something at the end?
I would just like to, tell students that they should go around themselves. In their vicinity, I am sure most of us have plants at home.
Right.
So you can just pick up, even you must be having tulsi, neem, people, all these plants are around us. Just pick up the leaves, just observe what they look like, try and draw them and then give names and see whether you are able to put them, you are able to write their characteristics properly.
Yeah, exactly.
Explore the flowers, open flowers, just see what is inside them. You will see different type of anthers, you will see stigma, stamen. So it's a fascinating word, and the most interesting part is it is all around us. So we don't have to go to a special lab or have good apparatus to observe flowers. They are all around us, happy to help us. So students should explore and learn, because by doing this, this chapter will become very easy for you to remember. This chapter has a lot of terms. So at sometimes it becomes very overbearing for students. So if they just observe around them, so they will quickly remember.
So is it any easiest way to remember all the terms and classification categories?
Yeah, I think they should make small bullet points for themselves and also write the name of the flower which is around them.
Okay.
So quickly they can recall, okay, polypetalous, oh, okay, this plant is near around me. So this will help them not only remember, but they remember it for long because they will be observing it. When we see something, then we remember it for very, very long.
Right.
So if you connect the term with a flower around you, then it becomes very easy for remembering.
Okay, so this was a small and very significant important tip for you, dear learners and viewers, and it's time for me to wrap up this session. But thank you so very much, ma'am, for your detailed information and enhancing our knowledge on morphology of flowering plants.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
So much.
Thank you.
So, dear learners, let me wrap up this session, but you don't need to go anywhere else because it's time for me to take a small break, but we will be back right after a short break. And the next session is on mathematics students. Stay with us. Namaskar.